experiment which I would be talking is something which has revolutionized the area of environmental ethics. In fact, it is the birth of environmental ethics can be traced back to this thought experiment. So, in 1971, he published this article. This small article, 3-page article or something like that, in which Richard Silver has elaborated this. So we would be, let me first talk about what is a thought experiment. Thought experiments are not really very rigorous arguments, but they are imagining sort of imaginations. A hypothetical, we imagine a sort of hypothetical situation in which something is allowed. It is basically a device for the imagination. More common features of thought experiments are imagine a possible situation, visualize details of the person, and try to if this situation takes place. We then draw a conclusion that the accepted view. Experiments are quite widespread in she's colorblind, but she knows everything about colors. Now this thought experiment is that she all of a sudden she regains her visual color perception, and there he is surprised. Though he knew everything, he lacked one thing. So anyway, so similarly, Thompson's the violinist thought experiment, in those who talk about abortion, anti-abortion arguments, and those who support the anti-abortion movements, and those who are against this, they also this is a very Judith Thompson's thought experiment. Suppose a violinist is there who is suffering from some major organ failure. Now, unless she is hooked to somebody for 9 months, she would die. So, and you are the person who is capable of sustaining her life. So the fans of this violinist, they come and take you, and they come and make you unconscious. They hook you to the violinist and say that, you see, you are the only person who can save this, and so you will be hooked up for 9 months. And during these 9 months, you recover, then you will be released. Now, you have this dilemma. Should you continue? You are being a victim without your consent. You are hooked to this violinist without your consent. But if you unhook yourself, or if you remove yourself from this violinist, then the violinist will die. This is similar to a fetus in the womb of a girl who has been raped, and the fetus has no option. It is innocent. The innocent fetus will die if the girl aborts. Should the girl abort the fetus? It is similar to a violinist. Now the argument goes like this, that the violinist has a right to protest and withdraw, because that is her, she has a right to this. She has no, because of no fault of her, she is being asked to do this. Now there are arguments and counter arguments about this. So similarly, there is a Gettiers knowledge argument, where in the traditional analysis of knowledge as specified true belief, and Gettier challenges this. He says that something can be justified, can be true, and a belief actually entertained by somebody, yet it may not be knowledge proper. And he has given several examples where this is possible. Similarly, Searle's Chinese room argument, Putnam's twin earth, Parfit's amoeba which is split like people who split like amoeba. Now, Sylvan's the thought experiment which we will be discussing, the thought man, the Sylvan's last man thought experiment. These are all only few samples. There are many others, as I told. Trolley problem, the first one, which is also my favorite topic, and I have also talked to in your college. Now, this Sylvan's last man argument has revolutionized in the sense that it has brought about certain changes in, it has actually created this area of environmental ethics. Sylvan, along with another philosopher, they have been together, they have brought this awareness that there is a need for a radical change in ethics, ethical approach. Now, traditional ethics in the West, that is anthropocentric. There the people are the real object of ethical concern, human beings. And it is the traditional ethics, Western ethics is based on the principle of, or freedom principle. According to this principle, a person is free to act provided he do not harm others or do not harm himself or herself irreparably. This anthropocentric principle is also termed as human chauvinism, or a modern terminology which is used is anthropocentrism. We are all trying to say that only human interests matter and they alone have moral deliberation and choice. So, rest of the things have got only instrumental value, they do not have intrinsic value. Only human beings have got intrinsic value. So, and this is what is so there was a paper published by Aldo Leopold, a book, a Sand County Almanac, and there he developed a land ethic. That is but at that time no philosopher paid any notice to this. So this remained unnoticed till the 70s, 60s, when this Richard Sylvan and R. Ness, these are the two philosophers who in their article, they brought about a revolutionary change in ethics. They said that there is a need for a new discipline, environmental ethics. Then interest in Aldo Leopold's work became conspicuous among philosophers. Until that time, this article, which we are all talking now, which was published in 1949, where he advocated extending ethics to ecosystems, encompassing ecosystems, that remained unnoticed by philosophers. Now, when you take up this particular thought experiment, certain concepts need to be clarified first. The key concepts which we'll be discussing is the distinction between instrumental and intrinsic value. Instrumental and intrinsic value is, as all students of philosophy know, that which is valuable for its own sake is called intrinsic, or non-instrumental, and that which is valuable because it can be said to achieve something, it can be used to achieve something, is called instrumental value. There are again, intrinsic value need not be all subjective or objective. There can be variations on that, but the distinction is that there are some values which are, because as Aristotle has already pointed out, if there are certain thing is a means to an end, the end ultimately there will be something which is an end in itself. Otherwise, it will be a vicious circle and it will go on like this. So, if there are instrumental value, there must be intrinsic value. So, but there are things which can be both instrumental and intrinsic value. A teacher is valuable as having instrumental value. He helps the students in understanding or learning certain things. He has got instrumental utility, he is paid for that, all that. But in addition to that, he is also having, as a human being, as a person who has been working in philosophy or any other branch of, he is also having intrinsic value. Now, then the concept of moral status is one thing. We are all concerned. According to the traditional view, the anthropocentric view, only human beings have got a moral status. They have intrinsic value. They have a moral standing. The rest of the things are valuable because as instruments. So they are morally considerable, but in a non-intrinsic sense. They have instrumental value. They only moral objects which owe duties and obligations to an entity, they are having moral status. But these things have been challenged. Why should you restrict moral status to only to human beings? Other things can be valuable in themselves. So this is what the last man thought experiment has been trying to hint at. Now, when you talk of what makes something having a moral status is that they have interests. When you have interest and that interest is harmed or benefited by something, then you have moral status. Now, we have an interest in something, if that thing makes our lives go better or worse. For human beings, we have various interests, tangible, intangible benefits. We have interest in self-actualization, self-esteem, safety, in getting nutrition, belonging to a group. Remember, these are the things which all human beings share. But there are also things out of these which also are shared by animals and plants. Plants also, or animals also seek safety. They also try to get nutrition. So they have these interests. So safety interest, nutritional interest, belonging to a group, they also have these interests. So they have a moral status, you can say, because they have these interests. Even plants also can be nourished, something can be benefited, or plants can be harmed if we poison them, or so they also have adequate nutrition, growth, self-actualization. They do not have this self-esteem, but that they also have these capacities or interest in self-actualization, nutrition. In case of plants also, animals, they have other interests also. They want to belong to a group. They are happy in their family, in their surroundings. Now, these are some of the interests. Now, in environmental ethics, there have been various approaches. Human-centric approach is one. but there are many. There are two broad approaches in environmental ethics: anthropocentric, uh, sensiocentric or syntiocentric or psychocentric, biocentric. These are all individualistic approaches. Then we have holistic approach, in which wholes or community as a whole, as a group, they have some interest. The whole is bearer of value. The whole is greater than the interconnected parts. This is the view of the holistic view. Individuals are the bearers of value. Traditionally, these views have been advocated in our tradition. We have been emphasizing from the very beginning the holistic tradition. We have the models, ethical, where we consider things as communities, interconnectedness of things, that is more emphasized. But in the West, the individualistic approach was dominant. Later on, now they are now realizing that we should give up this individualistic approach and we should also accept this holistic approach. Now, these are the, broadly speaking, these are the concepts which we will be using. So we come to the thought experiment, the last man thought experiment. And the author is Richard Sylvan. Richard Sylvan, actually, his name was Richard Routledge. He took the name of, surname of his wife. He became Richard Sylvan when he married to the lady, whose surname was Sylvan. So in our traditions, ladies take the surname of their husbands. But here, Richard Routledge took the name of his wife. Later on, they were separated, but he continued to remain as Richard Sylvan, though he was originally Richard Routledge, that was his birth name. Now, Richard Sylvan, or we can bracket within bracket say Routledge, because when he wrote this article, he was Richard Routledge. He formulated this argument in a paper in 1973. Is there a need for a new environmental ethics? This was this figured in the proceedings of the 15th World Congress of Philosophy. A 5-page article. I was wrong saying that, or 3 pages. But this is 2000. So there, Sylvan argued, or imagine that there is only one man left alive on the planet following a Holocaust. This man has the technology to, and this man also is going to die. So the man has the technology to destroy all living things before he died. He is the last man, and he will soon die. For some reason, the following thoughts run through his mind. Before I die, it would be great fun to destroy the earth with all its components. He sets out to eliminate all remaining living beings. Would it be morally wrong for him to do so? What he does is quite permissible according to the human chauvinistic view. But most people would say that it would be morally wrong. Common reaction would be to this eccentric view, let they be there. The last man should leave things as they are. There is no need for destroy those things. And if anybody does this, then morally we can censor him, that we can say that he is not doing the right thing. But why this? He is the last man, and he is also going to die soon. So after his death, no human beings will be there. So if the world is destroyed, if animals, plants, and other things are destroyed, there should not be any objection because they only have instrumental value. They do not have any intrinsic worth because they are valuable because human beings are there to enjoy them. Now, if you think that the last man is doing something wrong, morally wrong, then you say that there is something which that nature has intrinsic value. Non-humans also have intrinsic value. So this is what Richard argues to say that non-humans also have value. And among the non-humans, we can include animals, plants, and other wholes, species, ecosystems, greater and smaller ecosystems. So all these things can be thought of which are non-human, but they matter. And if we think that they matter, then the last man is definitely doing some injustice, immorality. Now you can say that, well, the last man is doing something immoral because the animals also are sentient, and by even if no human beings are there, animals will be there, and by killing them, you are also violating the utilitarian principle. We know Bentham talked about this principle that animals are capable of feeling pleasure and pain, so they have a moral status like human beings. Because they can feel pleasure and pain, their suffering matters, and they have a ground for moral consideration. Now, if we can also imagine the situation in which we can take care of this. Suppose the animals are also they are wiped out painlessly. So we have the technology to wipe out animals without pain, any pain. So no harm is done, no pain is there. So if animals are eliminated by a method where they are all put to sleep and they are destroyed, so we are not affecting the amount of pleasure and pain which is there. Thus they are silently killed. If this thing happens, then we are doing something which should be acceptable. But here we say no. Animals, they deserve our moral considerations. Not only animals, but also other things, non-animals, all living things, they have their value independent of our interests. Now, this argument is this is a thought experiment. Sometimes it is called an argument. The argument can be put in this form: last man's act of intentionally destroying nature is wrong. There is no other reason for the wrongness of this act. Therefore, nature has intrinsic value. Now, this has a particular form, but it is not an argument. Some would object that this is not an argument, and if it is put this way, then now there has been various changes to this thought experiment. Richard Rorty himself brought about some changes. It may be argued that what makes it wrong to destroy non-human world is that the last man kills so many sentient beings. This can be accommodated by imagining that all sentient beings are dead, save the last man, or that he makes use of technology to terminate the remaining sentient beings painlessly, so no suffering would be involved in his action. Now, if we take this also, Then others have said that, well, we can still say that what the person is doing, the last, you see, last man, he said, we can better call it last person, because we are, again, man and women, they are sexist languages. So we have some, but somehow Rutledge talked about the last man, but we can substitute last person or last people in place of man. Now, it can be argued that what makes it wrong to destroy all the life is that it destroys the potential for future intelligent or sentient beings. By killing them, the future would be deprived of future beings who would have enjoyed this world. Now, suppose there is no time, and you are the last person, and other sentient beings would not to take human life or evolve human life out of that will take millions of years, and the earth may not last so long. So the continued existence of non-intelligent, non-sentient being is instrumentally valuable because this may allow intelligent or sentient being one day to evolve. The last man destroys this possibility. Hence, his actions are wrong. But you imagine, because thought experiments are our imagination, so we can also imagine that there is no time left for sentient life to evolve. In such a scenario, we really only have non-sentient beings to consider. If we think that the last man has done anything wrong in this scenario, then you have to admit that the non-sentient world has intrinsic value. This argument has been again modified further. Imagine that all sentient beings are dead, say one man, as we have imagined in the beginning. Only remaining non-sentient beings' life is kept in a laboratory underground. The last man also lives in the laboratory. He has a choice. He can release some of the organisms into the surface to repopulate the planet, or he can eat them. There is only enough to provide him with nutrition for a week. So these modifications are not by Rutledge, but others have tried to bring these modifications. There is only enough to provide him nutrition for a week. He is also going to die soon. But if he eats them, he will live only for 7 days. If he does not eat them and allows them to repopulate the plant life, then there will be more plant lives. If we say that human beings have greater value than plants, then what the person is doing by eating all these plants which could have repopulated the world is doing something which is highly unethical. He should have left these things. He is going to die sooner or later. If he dies now, at least those plants can survive and can repopulate other things. But if he just kills them, there is an end to it all. Now, if you say that human beings have value and a greater value than other things, then the person who is destroying or eating away all these things, the only things which are there which could have saved the earth from repopulating the plant lives, then he is doing something wrong. There are also other variants of this argument. The thought experiment is one characteristic of this is that it is quite flexible. Many other philosophers have also made modifications. They have also argued, following this last man argument, to argue for the intrinsic value of nature in various ways. Holmes Rolston, one eminent environmentalist, environmental ethicist, Robin Hartfield, Mary Warren, they have also presented variants of this last man argument in their own way. That the world would be poorer if we just say that we destroy certain things which are of natural beauty and yeah. Remember, G. Moore, the famous philosopher, he also conducts a kind of thought experiments like Richard Sylvan's thought experiment in 1903 in his book. He says that let us imagine one world exceedingly beautiful. Imagine it as beautiful as you can. Put into it whatever on this earth you most admire. Mountains, rivers, the sea, trees, and sunsets, stars and moon. Imagine these are all combined in the most exquisite proportions, so that no one thing jars against another, but each contributes to increase the beauty of the whole. And then imagine the ugliest world you can possibly conceive. Imagine it simply one heap of filth containing everything that is most disgusting to us for whatever reason, and the whole, as far as maybe without one redeeming feature. The only thing we are not entitled to imagine is that any human being ever has or ever by any possibility can live in either of these planets. Can ever see and enjoy the beauty of the whole one or hate the foulness of the other. Well, even so, supposing them to quite apart from any possible contemplation by human beings, still it is irrational to hold that it is better that the beautiful world should exist than the other one which is ugly. Is it irrational to hold that this is a better world to exist than the ugly world? If you say that the better world should exist, we should protect. If the choice is given, we should say that the better world is which is having aesthetic sense and beauty. So this is what G. Moore. We can see the similarity between last man argument of Richard Routledge and G. Moore's argument, but this was an argument to say that beauty is objective, it's not simply man-made. Even if no human beings are there, the world with all these mountains and rivers and other things is a better world than the world in which there is only dung and other things. And the dung is not there, but there is some only the ugly better. This world is better. So this way we can visualize that the Richard Routledge or Richard Sylvan, who is better known, proposes this thought experiment, which has many ramifications. Many others have also followed suit in conducting similar thought experiments. That is one beauty of thought experiments, that it is something very flexible, malleable, and people have taken this scope. They have tried to change it in some way or other to accommodate our different insights. So this has been the case that we have been imagining situations in which non-human beings also have intrinsic value. What things have got intrinsic value? The first thing are the animals. Non-human animals also have interest. because they also have a moral status. They can be harmed or benefited. So human beings are not the only sole possessor of intrinsic value. They have interest, but other animals also have. Not only animals, plants also have interest. They also flourish. They also perish. They can be sustained. They can be. You can just pour kerosene onto a plant and the plant will die. So you are doing some damage to the plant. Even they cannot move, but they can have certain sensibilities. They are using, you know, the Laja Lata. You touch it and it just closes, it sleeps. So they in the night they have the close, most of the leaves are there closed. They do not need food production, so they take rest like this. So animal plants also have many features. They can flourish, they can perish, they can be harmed, they can be benefited. They also have the capacity for self-actualization. A seed contains all the things which are there in the plant. If it gets a proper nourishment and fertilizers or other things, then it will grow into a beautiful plant. So to say that it has interest, so it also not only depends on our interest, it also has its own interest. So it has got its intrinsic value. Now this way of proceeding from animals which are they have a psychological feature or sentience they have, to plants which are not sentient, but they have interest. They can be harmed, they can be benefited, so they also matter. Now to this, we can add further that there are bigger wholes, communities, which are valuable in themselves. Not because the individuals who contain it, but the individuals, the whole is bigger than the individuals who constitute it. So this is a tradition most of the religions, they have been trying to emphasize. God has not only made man, God has also created all these things, as the believers would say. So they also are object of our admiration. If you worship God, you also should take care of all his creations. They are no less creations of God than we are. So, and in our Indian tradition also, we have the view that the community has a life of its own. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have this motto. We try to say that the community is bigger than the whole. You are all aware of this in some form or other. You are a student of a particular college. You work for the college. You have some celebrations where you give up your personal comforts. You remain awake and take care of the proceedings of the seminar. You take care of the festivities where your individual ego, individual interest is sacrificed. For you identify yourself with a bigger one. Think of a football club, cricket team, where the individuals, unless you give up your individual interest and you identify yourself with the whole, you are not living a particular, you are not a really member of that. So all these things, the holistic, this actually became more popular and more appealing with the science of ecology. Ecology as a science has been, earlier religions have been emphasizing this interconnectedness of things. But ecology, which is a scientific discipline, it emphasizes this point, which only earlier metaphysicians and religionists, they have been emphasizing. Now, ecology also emphasizes that we are all part of the whole. And the greater the whole, greater identity it has got. So you realize yourself when you are a part of that. Your true self is the universal self, which Vedanta has been emphasizing. And this is also, there are two, as I said in the beginning, Richard Sylvan is one. Then another philosopher who has been instrumental in the birth of environment is Arnes. Arnes in his deep ecology and Richard Sylvan in this article, they gave birth to this new discipline, environmental ethics. And they are both emphasizing that the ecological wholes, ecoethics, which we can call it, is a reality. The whole is greater than the parts which constitute it. The individualism, which says that the whole is nothing but the totality of the parts, is only partly right. The other thing is that the whole has a reality of its own. And if we take that into consideration, the ecological wisdom which should be harnessed is that we should value the whole ecological system, the whole earth. We are, in some other lectures, I have been emphasizing this. As Leopold, although Leopold talked about land ethics, we can also talk about earth ethics, where the earth becomes the center of our ethical concern. We are part of this earth. It is our home. Only during several decades back, people could go beyond the earth and see it from above. And they realize how beautiful this is, how magnificent it is. Our home, when you go to some foreign country, you realize your country, the worth of your country. Similarly, when you go from one community to another, you realize your intimacy with the community from which you have come. Your identity is your village, your religion. They give you a sort of identity. Similarly, when people left the earth and saw it from a distance, they were enamored. The earth became an object of moral concern. Not only beauty, but also morality is a proper way of looking at the whole earth. So this way, this has been possible to talk about non-human nature as having intrinsic value. And when we talk about non-human nature, we not only talk of other individuals, non-human individuals, but also the wholes of which we are a part. So this way, from individual-centric views, we have shifted to the ecocentric views, holistic views, where the whole is more real than the individual parts which make it. Ecology is a science which has been showing how interconnected things are. If one part is destroyed, the other parts also gets destroyed. So things are valuable because they are part of the whole. They are valuable as individuals. We do not deny that. But that is not the whole story. Apart from the individuals, they also have value as a whole. Now, about these thought experiments, we must also realize that they have their own limitations. Thought experiments are not really arguments. They are only they camouflage as arguments, but they are only appealing to our intuitions, common sense intuitions. We train is running, no driving. In front of the train, there are 5 persons working. They don't notice it. But you have the capacity constructed, and people are asked what they will do. Most of them say that we will divert the train, because by diverting, we are killing one, saving 5 lives. So if the train proceeds without any intervention, then it will kill 5 persons. But if the train is diverted, you pull a switch which will divert it, then one person will die. But this one person is innocent. But these 5 persons also are innocent. They have not committed any crime. So you say that it is better to do that. Then there are other variations like other thought experiment. This also thought experiment also has other variations, where we imagine that instead of pulling a switch, where the train is diverted to a different direction, here what you do that you are standing on an overbridge. On an overbridge you stand, and there is a fat man by your side, and the train is approaching. It will kill the 5 persons. Now, if you push this fat man from the overbridge, this fat man will fall on the line, and his bulk is enough to stop the train. So 5 persons will be saved, but this fat man will die. Will you do this? Contrary to our original intuition that killing one person is permissible, and because you are saving 5 lives, doesn't apply here. In most cases, people would say that no, one should not push the fat. If 90% of the people say that yes, you should pull the lever and divert the train, where one person will be killed but 5 will be saved. Situation is same. Here you are killing one person. Here our intuition goes against the view that one should push the fat. And here 90% of people say that no, we should not do this. Our intuitions again are not very reliable guide to say whether we should do something or not. It is something which here there are other grounds for these differing intuitions. That when you say that you should pull the switch to divert the train, but you should not push the man, there are various explanations. You say we have evolution has made it like that. We should not harm somebody by pulling or pushing somebody. From a distance we can do this because our evolution has not made us aware of these things. So now these are the possibilities where we can do an action at a distance. By pulling the trigger, you can kill somebody, and by pushing somebody over a cliff, you can pull somebody, kill somebody. But here the intuition goes against pulling or pushing somebody physically. So this way, these thought experiments are very interesting. They try to enlighten our intuitions, but they are, in a sense, are intuition box. They do not establish the arguments. They need to be argued out. So it is not enough that the thought experiments can change. The other things have been there. And there is also another thing is that which Hume also said that we must be cautious about inferences which draw evaluative conclusions from descriptive premises. Ought conclusions cannot be derived from these premises. But this is an argument not only against the thought experiments but all ethical arguments. Whenever you argue for certain things, you have to derive on certain factual premises, and it is, if you say that ought cannot be derived from these premises, that is only part of the story. We do derive ought conclusions from these premises, and that is the practice which we all are doing. This how do we do it? That is different. So it is not only in case of thought experiments are doing this, but in all arguments we have to proceed from each premises to ought conclusions. So this is not an attack on thought experiments, because in thought experiments also they are not rigorous arguments. Secondly, this is a practice which we all are engaged in drawing evaluating conclusions from descriptive premises. despite of what he was said. So even though the last man argument fails to establish objective grounds for non-anthropocentric values, but it helps us to regiment our intuitions. They are sometimes called intuition forms. It appeals to our environmentally enlightened conscience. Some people, those who discuss these questions, their conscience also is enlightened. They also see things which others have not seen. So third, this last man argument enables us to realize these things. And this last man thought experiment draws our attention to the attractiveness of the rich, diverse, complex, and beautiful biological systems. So this has got its role, and this has done its part. We don't say that this is the only thing, because as a science, they have been doing a lot of this. And Arnes, who is also advocating ecoethics. So these two philosophers, those who are advocating ecoethics, these are Silvan and Arnes. They have been talking about this, and they are actually fathers of this ethical movement, environmental ethics, and we should give some credit to, though not the full credit, to Richard Silvan's argument or thought experiment. In fact, some books on environmental ethics, they say that there is the only thought experiment in which we are required to imagine other situations. Other cases we do not need to imagine. They are happening. Environmental is full of such situations where our conscience bites and our conscience is beaten. And if you are enlightened, your conscience is enlightened, you will environmentally enlightened, then you will definitely realize that the real world has value of its own. Not only it is for human consumption, it is for, they have their intrinsic value. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable and inspiring talk on the last man thought experiment. We all live in a common world. Hello. Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Okay. Though we live in a common platform, the common world, and face the problems, but the way to solve problems are different. Our way of life depends upon our perception towards the world and life. Any human enterprises, for that matter, needs to be human. It is only the filtered thinking that makes life meaningful. Purification through thoughts. Controversy we find in the lecture of Professor Mahanti in the form of intrinsic and instrumental. All these controversies that come to our mind, that we face in our day-to-day life, makes us or puts us into an as last man found. How that how a rich, diverse, and beautiful biological system could be preserved and we are the human beings, the conception of being a part of the whole cosmos. You see how logical bent of mind is different from dogmatic bent of mind. Because in logic, we proceed to reach at a better world through argumentation. This is what sort of experimentation? That is thought experimentation, which is highlighted in the whole course of talk of Professor Mahanti. I express my gratitude to Professor Mahanti for her inspiring and encouraging talk for pursuing philosophical studies into the minds of our students particularly and in general to all. With these words, I now request Professor Jagannath Prasad Mahanti to conduct the questionnaire session. After this questionnaire session, sirs, those who have joined would be invited to speak on the occasion of the day. Professor Mahanti, you conduct the questionnaire session. If any doubts or any clarifications, Professor Mahanti.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, a very warm good evening to all of you, and I must wish happy World Philosophy Day to all of you. And thank you for everything, and respected Soroj sir, and Dhaneshwar sir, Ranjit sir, our head Vijay sir, my colleagues, and all the participants. I must thank Soroj sir for his lucid presentation. Once Socrates said, true wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand about life, ourselves, and the world. So I'm sure we all have some queries, and I would like to request all of you, if you have any kind of questions, then do drop a message in the chat box. In between, let me request Dhaneshwar Sahul sir to unmute his mic and share his view, followed by Ranjit. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, very much.
My esteemed teacher, Professor Mahanti, and my dear colleagues and friends, really, I was listening very carefully to the talk of my teacher, Professor Mahanti. Today is, as we know, today is the World Philosophy Day. From 2002, the United Nations has been observing the third Thursday of November as the World Philosophy Day. For a week, this is open. Any university, college, or educational institute can observe it. Today I read a good article written by Dr. Narayana Mahanti, a retired teacher of philosophy. Ame kahinki darshan padhilu, and he has referred to 4 biographies authored by four persons like Professor Radhanath Ratha, Professor Hrudananda Rai, Professor Ganeshwara Das, and Professor um, Patti, Kangali Charan Patti. He has referred to their biographies and why they decided to study philosophy, and what is their impression of a philosophy before studying it, and how when they completed their study and then joined as teachers of philosophy in different colleges, they got a different picture. It is also true to some extent in my case. I would have taken mathematics as my honors, but in my young days, I had some other understanding, a different understanding of philosophy. And later on, after studying philosophy for some years and then joining as a teacher in some colleges, my idea, my conviction, and my view on philosophy changed, as it happened to all the four illustrious teachers of Odisha, like Professor Radhanath Ratha, Hrudananda Rai, Ganeshwara Das, and Kangali Charan Patti. As I understand, philosophy stands for critical thinking and a reflective enterprise. We can very well say what questions are not philosophical or what is not the subject matter of philosophy, but sometimes it is very difficult to describe or to define what philosophy is. Any other discipline, intellectual discipline, has a strict boundary of its own, has its own conceptual framework, has its own specific subject matter, but philosophy does not have. And further, the concept of philosophy has been changing from time to time in the annals of human history. What is the concept of philosophy in the Greek age that changed in the medieval period, that again changed with the advent of the modern age, and again philosophy entered a new revolution after the appearance of Wittgenstein on this scene. In this way, philosophy has been changing from time to time, and perhaps it is very difficult to say what philosophical questions are. But to some extent, now we have a universally accepted notion of philosophy, that philosophy is a second order discipline. It is a critical thinking, conceptual analysis, aiming at conceptual clarity, and philosophy gives studies the conceptual boundaries of all disciplines of thought. In this way, philosophy is understood in the present day analysis. My professor, my teacher, gave a brilliant talk on this environmental ethics or as thought experiment. This is something new, but the topics he presented, to my mind, some of the topics are controversial. I say some of the views are controversial in the sense because when we speak of environmental ethics, perhaps the anthropocentric regime still has a primacy. Anthropocentrism has a primacy because all ethical values, human knowledge, human progress, civilization, culture, art, philosophy, all have their meaning in human context. They will become obsolete if man is not there. And I am reminded of a philosopher, Paul Kurtz, and he has given a new concept, that is planetary humanism. It is our moral responsibility as human beings to save our planets, because if our planet exists, then we can exist. And for that matter, our moral obligation has extended to the animal world, to the biocentric world, and to the planet as a whole. This is the idea from I know my limitations, but I know that perhaps I may be wrong, but it was Paul Kurz who gave this idea of a planetary humanism. And after that is then again a long story, how he got this idea, because some books were published in his time which gave the impression that the world will not be a fit place for human habitation if in this way we will be going on eroding the environment. So many ideas came by the by, and environmental ethics, biocentrism, geocentrism, so many ideas emerged then. Then I beg to differ from my esteemed teacher on some of the points. One important point that I differ from him, sir told that interconnected approach is something fundamental to Indian culture or Indian civilization and Indian philosophy, whereas Western society is not holistic, but they are more individualistic and we are more holistic. Perhaps this view is not correct. To my understanding, Indian civilization, Indian society, Indian culture, Indian value system has excluded a large section of the people as Dalits, as untouchables, as Sudras, as tribals, and they have never included in the social life of the community. So our very culture makes exclusion of people, and we, speaking of the world unity, speaking of the Atman, Brahman identity, I think there is some hypocrisy in this approach, because when in the practical life, when in the real situation of our society, we find a large section of people have always been excluded from our social ethos, from our social life. They have no right to participate in our community living. This is the real scenario. So I don't agree with the view that Indian civilization, Indian culture gives a holistic view of life, holistic view of the world, and Western civilization gives an individualistic view of the world. That is, similarly, Sir gave the example that the train example, whether to kill a single person to save the life of 5 persons or leave it, what may happen. To my mind, when we are in a crisis of two evils, perhaps all will agree that accepting the lesser evil is desirable in such a situation. When I have to choose between two evils, and there is no other way, then I have to choose the lesser evil. That is the moral compulsion in that situation. And perhaps there will be no controversy on this issue. But students of philosophy, teachers of philosophy, scholars of philosophy, because they are very rational minded and they are very critical, they have ability to critically analyze things. So many speculative situations can be imagined, many hypothetical situations can be imagined, but a common man's view is that when I am in a dilemma, what to do in a particular situation, when there are two evils in me, issue, we can write volumes on problem, but this is the common sense view that that an ordinary man also accepts. That is my humble submission. But the talk was very illuminating, and I accept most of the ideas of my teacher, Professor Mahanti, though I have some difference with his views. My identity sometimes is more important, or the identity of my community is more important. Any sensible person will say that my community, of which I am a part, has more importance than myself. I have many identities, not one identity. As a teacher, I have one identity. As a male person, I have another identity. As an Odia speaking person, I have a different identity. As a Hindu, I have some other identity. So an individual carries with him many identities, not one identity. And when a person has so many identities, it is very natural on his part to extend his moral obligation to many identities and not to be restricted to one his individual identity. So these are some of my stray ideas which came to my mind while I was listening to the brilliant talk of my teacher. Thank you, my friends, and particularly Professor Bijay Kumar Naik, for giving me an opportunity to share some of my isolated or stray ideas. Thanking you once again.
Thank you very much, sir, for your view. It was really great to hear. Now I request Saroj Mohanty, sir, if he has any response to what sir has said, then please.
Well, I entirely agree with you, Professor Dhaneswar, my student also, once upon a time, and I continue to call him by his first name. So, thank you for your very keen observations. Actually, we can't say that only individualistic and holistic approaches are different in the West. They are purely individualistic, and our is purely holistic. But there is a trend, and greater in the past also we had this trend where we identified the community we regarded as a bigger one. So this view, when came to disrepute with some fascists, those who talked about the state is superior to the individual. So they tried to blame the community or the whole and the individual as the tradition, the individualistic traditions like Hobbes, Locke, they also emphasize that that rights are more important than duties. And they talked of human rights. But rights without duties, again, is a part view. Both are necessary, and one can be realized only when the other thing is realized. So rights and duties, individual and community, both, we have to value the individual rights, but that makes sense only in the context of a community, when we have shared values. So duties and rights, individuals and communities, they are part of the whole. This has been emphasized in our tradition, in the West also, not necessarily that West is purely individualistic and East is purely holistic. But sometimes this is more emphasized here in the beginning also. But now that is being realized, the interconnectedness of things is more emphasized because of the ecological science and other things. Science also becomes a part of this. They try to find out how the things are interconnected, and they bring these facts into it. And I do agree that what injustice has been done in the name of our Hindu traditions and in the Western part. But here again, we have also reacted to these things. there is a Buddha. There is also many people, they have tried to emphasize that discriminating on the basis of this caste, color, creed is something which does not stand to reason. So it is when we critically examine these things, you do shed light on these views, and we realize that we have been doing something very wrong in the past, and by discriminating human beings and saying that enlightened humanism, where human beings are the things who are only there because what it is to be human. It is not human to be think of yourself as different from animals and plants and other things. As Darwin pointed out, as other scientists have pointed out, we have evolved from them. If we have evolved from them, they are we are part of that family. So the plants, animals, they are, if they are not brothers, we can call them our cousins. So we are in a world together. We have evolved from them and we are a part of them. So realizing your ecological self, not this abstract Brahman or something other, but is that your ecological self, which is a product of evolution. And you have evolved from these things. So you cannot completely ignore them. To say that only human beings have value. And what it is to be human. To be human is not simply to be confined to your body. Your greater self is something which encompasses these things. When a principal comes to the college, he forgets his own identity. He forgets that he or she is member of the family, or he identifies or she identifies herself with the college, the interest of the college. So whenever we identify ourselves with a larger whole, we are realizing our human potentiality. So to be human is not simply following our own interests. Our interest also is not different from the interest of our fellow beings, which also include animals and plants and other things. The more we realize this, the better human beings we are. So what it is to be human also differ. It is not simply one becomes a human by simply identifying. If you expand your identity by talking about these things, that is what the Buddha has been doing. That that our culture, many of our cultures, not only in India but in the West also, that they call, we can call it anthropocentric, no doubt, no harm. But here this is enlightened anthropocentric. This is, you are not yourself. This is not where you are confined to your body. When the mother feels pain, when the child is suffering, so she identifies with the child. And here also in our traditions, people have been suffering, the suffering of the animals, plants, and the so-called other human beings who are deprived of their status by including all these things into our selfhood. So this is a kind of realization we are all trying to realize, that human beings are not apart from nature. Our true self is our natural self, nature as part of nature. We are not simply confined to our body. The more you identify yourself with the greater whole, you are more human in that way. So this would be humanism again, in a refined form of humanism, to identify yourself with these greater units or greater things, of which we are only a part. Thank you for your comments and for your observations, are very, very illuminating. And I have been benefited by your critical observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Right now, Professor Ranjit Ghosh is not available. I now request Madam Kalyani Sarangi to say a few words with us. Madam Kalyani Sarangi.
Am I audible to all of you? Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
You are
ma'am. Yes.
audible. Proceed.
Um, Good evening to all of you, esteemed Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti sir. On the eve of World Philosophy Day, I wish you all good health and happiness. Perhaps this is the theme of 2021. Coming to the presentation of Saroj sir, I simply say that it is a very illuminating talk for me. I heard so many times from sir about last man argument and about all the thought experiments, but today's talk of sir was so illuminating, and personally I will talk about myself. I am so benefited because recently I just attended a refresher course on environmental studies, and I just relate to it, and I am so benefited when I am talking particularly about environmental ethics. So it just a question of my mind, and I am thankful to Vijay sir for arranging such a good occasion so that we can hear more to sir. So thank you everyone, and I am congratulating sir for his beautiful way of presentation, and particularly the PowerPoints are so clear, and really we are benefited. Thank you sir. Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your beautiful words. Now I request Professor Pramod Kumar Das to speak few words.
Good evening to all of you. I really enjoyed the talk of my rebel teacher, Professor Mahanti. It was a very beautiful talk. I enjoyed the argument, the last man argument. This was a very new approach to moral consciousness, moral concern. So it is not a question of Indian or Westerner, a man of Indian land, Indian man of India or a man of the Western land. This is a question to man. How far he is morally conscious, and the situation is given in this in this imaginary plot that if it can be imagined that there is a last man who is going to die, still there is moral consciousness, still there is moral responsibility, still there is moral obligation for the rest of the creation. This amounts to the Vedantic approach, the approach that there is something behind the human existence. Because this man is going to die, so there is no liability, there is no accountability of morality. Nobody will challenge, nobody will judge the action of that last man. So I enjoyed that very much because this is the moral consciousness. That means that in morality, there is no excuse, there is no exception. It is holistic because, why it is holistic? Because being human is not being rational, not only rational for the sake of doing good, being expert in logic, being expert in argumentation. That is not rationality. If someone is really rational, his rationality should be pervasive. His rational approach should be holistic. He should reach the non-human sentient beings. He should reach the nature. That is therefore our culture says Vasundhaiva Kuntubakam. Our culture says Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Our culture says Isam Sarvam. We believe in this culture. Yes, these doctrines are there, but we people, some of us, are violating, are not. We are engaged in rational arguments. We are engaged in divisions. Therefore, there is misunderstanding. So man is responsible for not being moral. Man is responsible for any type of deviation. Animals don't deviate. Plants don't deviate. Nature does not deviate from the moral order. It is the man who claims that he is rational. He deviates from all types of moral order. So man is the solution and man is the problem. I enjoyed this talk very much because being a Westerner, Richard Silvan, he is talking about the last man argument in such a beautiful way that there is a moral concern at every point of existence, even the last moment of existence when he is going to die. So really, it is wonderful. I enjoyed this. I have recorded this episode, and thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramod. Thank you for your
Thank
very critical observations and also
And
appreciation.
and sir, one thing I shall add that this is last man argument from the Western side, but in the Upanishad, we can say this is the first man argument. Aham Brahmasmi. If I am Brahman, I am the first man who should be the morally conscious, irrespective of the fact that whether I am going to die or not. It is not necessary that when I am going to die, I shall be morally conscious. So yes, the last man argument can be converted to the first man argument in our Indian culture, in the teachings of Vedas and Upanishads. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your talk.
Thank you.
Now I request Professor Narayana Mohanty sir to speak few words in this occasion. Sir.
सम्माननीय प्रोफेसर एस.के. महांती एवं बंधुगण, अत्यंत सुखर कथा जे आज दिनटी आम विश्वव्यापी विश्व दर्शन दिवस रूप पालन करुच्चे। अवसर में आपण समस्त को अभिनंदन ज्ञापन करुच्चे। विषय वस्तु उपर मोर किछ कहबार नहीं, किंतु संप्रति सारा विश्व रे विशेषतः भारत वर्ष रे मूल्यबोध गुड़िकर जेपरी परिवर्तन घटुची कहले तो भावुची ठीक हेबनी। मूल्यबोध गुड़िक जेमती संपूर्ण बदली जाउची ता मनरे अशेष दुख एवं क्षोभ जात करुची। मु एक उदाहरण देउची। समय थिला जेतेबेले जैनिक व्यक्ति बा अपराधी जेल खाना बाहर थिला, समाज ता प्रति एक भिन्न दृष्टिभंगी पोषण करुथिला। किंतु आज जेतेबेले से व्यक्ति बा से अपराधी कारागार मुक्त होउची, तार बापा खूब खुशी होई ताको पाछोटी आनिबा को कारागार द्वार रे पहुंचुचंती। घर को आनी सारला परे घरे एक उत्सव आयोजन करा जाउची। मूल्यबोध गुड़िकर एई भली परिवर्तन मु भाबुची एक भल लक्षण नुहे एवं एई भली परिस्थिति रे मूल्यबोध गुड़िकर सुरक्षा पाई दार्शनिक बा दर्शन शास्त्रविद मानकर एक गुरु दायित्व रही। आशा करी से माने समस्ते आमे समस्ते हमर दायित्व संपन्न करिबा। खुशी रे कथा सार को तो शेष आड़ को सुनिली, मैडम षडंगी को मध्य सुनिली, श्रद्धेय प्रमोद को मध्य सुनिली। समस्त को धन्यवाद जनाउची। विभागीय मुख्य एवं विभागीय अध्यापक अध्यापिका छात्र छात्री मानक एक कार्यक्रम आयोजन करथिबार धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करी मोर वक्तव्य शेष करूची। भारत माता की जय।
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now I request all the participants, if they have any kind of queries, then kindly unmute your mic and deliver. If anyone have any queries, please.
Any student of your college?
Professor Jagannath, can I ask something?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was thinking, as Professor Mohanty said about this ecological self, and if sir can tell us, as we accept this more and more, this ecological self, as he was explaining at the almost okay, at the beginning of at the end of his lecture, can this help us, sir, in reducing some of the modern day discussions on, let's say, racism or things like that, or regionalism or things like that, as we more accept this ecological self, as you were explaining that somewhere these even creatures are, if not friend, cousins and things like that. Thank you, sir.
Vijay, who was talking?
Abhishek Tripathi.
Acha, acha.
Sir, Abhishek Tripathi.
Acha, acha. Thank you, Mr. Tripathi. And actually, for highlighting this ecological self, concept of ecological self. Actually, this is a whole. When we identify with the whole, we identify with this ecological whole, or and the earth is a bigger system. The whole earth, when you identify as an Indian, as an Odia, and there is an identity we have of the whole earth as one ecological system, interconnected system. So the more you go on transforming your narrow self to a bigger one, you realize yourself. It's a kind of self-realization. Ourness, along with this Richard Silvan, these two persons are responsible for the birth of environmental ethics. He talks about this, that we are, when you identify yourself with the whole ecological self, you are realizing yourself. It is a kind of self-realization, which Vedanta has been saying, and which other religions have been emphasizing, that you identify yourself with a larger whole. You have, that is your true self. So this kind of realization makes you something bigger, and that way you are enriching yourself. So these are all observations, and for your thank you for making these references. And I only pointed out how this has changed. How from egocentric approach, human-centric approach to ecocentric approach, it has been possible because of these arguments and thought experiments and other things. So, thank you for drawing attention to this aspect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the participants. Looks like we don't have any more questions. So now it's over to Vijay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jagannath Babu, for your nice conduct of the questionnaire session. Now, I request Madam Vinita Kar to propose vote of thanks to the participants to the speaker and the dignitaries of today's talk.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all. Respected Principal Ma'am, Professor Kalyani Patnaik, most distinguished Chief Speaker of the day, Professor Saroj Kumar Mohanty, sir, our beloved HOD, Vijay Kumar Nayak, sir, honorable professors present here, my colleague, my dear students, it seems to be honorable to propose a vote of thanks to all have helped us making this webinar a very grand success. First of all, I would like to thank my hearty thanks to our Chief Speaker, Professor Saroj Mohanty, sir, for gracing today's webinar. Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking and interesting talk. I would like to express our gratitude to Principal Ma'am for her presence and guidance. I would also like to convey my gratitude to Professor Dhaneshwar sir, to Professor Kalyani Madam, Professor Pramod Kumar Das sir, Professor Narayan Mohanty sir, Professor Abhishek Tripathi sir for sharing their valuable thoughts. Thank you all. I would thank our HOD, Professor Vijay Kumar Nayak, for his guidance and moral support. I am happy to express a vote of thanks to our staff that has made this seminar a grand success. I would like to thank our colleague, Charu Madam, Arjun sir, Jagannath sir, Antajami for making this seminar a grand success through their motivation and dedication. I thank those who have participated for making this event success. We are also grateful to ICPR sponsoring organization. I thank to media persons, technicians. Thank you so much. Finally, I thank to the wonderful students who have turned up in such great number. Once again, I thank all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you all. Namaskar.